Hey there, welcome back to the Small Logic channel. I am Ramona, and today's Reddit story is what is the creepiest, most unexplained thing that's ever happened to you? That's part two, because we already did a part one, obviously. And, well, let's just get into this, shall we? Oh, before we get started, though, if you like this video or any of my videos, would you mind leaving a comment or maybe a like or subscribing to the channel? And if you enjoy coloring, go check out my author's page. There's a link in the description. Coloring books released every Monday. There's a lot of them up there. There's also some novels and stuff if you're into that. If not, that's cool too. But let's get on to the video now. Ready? I was sitting in my living room watching Netflix. It was around 6 p.m., June 21, 2024. The evening sun was shining on the blind in my condo. I can only describe what happened next as best as I can. It was like someone grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and yanked me somewhere. After this instant, I have no memory as to what happened. An hour later, maybe, the movie was over and the sun had changed position on the blinds. I dropped back in a completely different place in my condo. I was now on the floor. My instant response was, "What the F?" And before that thought had fully developed, I said, "Holy F," over and over and over again. Everything changed in a second. I paced my condo for 3 days, freaking out. There were white orbs everywhere, continuously other side messages, a knowledge that is so engulfing. I was off work for 8 months, Unexplainable, otherworldly, the crazies had it right the whole time. We are not alone. And someone did reply with, "Are you sure it wasn't some sort of seizure?" It could be, who knows. Around 10 years ago in college, me and some students built an English learning club. At the time, we were 8 people and wanted to recruit more. We got another 26 students, so in total there were 32 people. The 8 people, including me, held a recreational event at a medium-sized guest house, and it was a foresty area with tall trees and near a mountain, and the distance to another house was quite far. We held the event on day one until around 11 p.m. Then the 26 new members go to sleep while us main committee evaluate how the day one is going. For the evaluation, we went to the room in which you go there to need a walk straight to a hallway, and then it stops at a hall and the door of the room to your right. The room is quite big, and we walk and laugh and then start the meeting. I was the closest to the door and stand maybe 3 to 4 meter distance, while the others are sitting on the floor, the chair, or also standing. It was very quiet in the middle of the night around. Well, they didn't give time, so you can clearly hear the wind howling and hit the roof and the building. When we were talking about 20 minutes in, suddenly we heard a knocking sound on the door, about 3 knocks, and all of us immediately stop our talk and turn our head to look at the door. We were looking and whispering to each other maybe 15 to 20 seconds, and then one of us shouts, "Who's there?" Immediately, the knocking started again, but now louder and faster. As we think this might be some new member doing us a prank, so me and my friend run to the door and open it, but there's no one there. No sight, no sound of anyone. Mind you that the hallway was long and it was impossible for someone to run out of sight. Also, the time between the knock and when we opened the door was very fast. We were creeped out and tried to finish the meeting fast, then take a rest. We never got the proper answer for it, and for me, it was the most unexplained so far. I lived in Montana for a few years with my mom. My friends admitted to me later that the house had a weird energy to it. It could have been because of my mom. I don't know. She was a psychotic, prior prison warden for 25 years. Anyway, I was smoking weed once in the upstairs office because it was the top floor room and I could blow the smoke out the window. It was a sunny, beautiful day. I was standing in the middle of the room, which had sunlight streaming through the window. I noticed a white feather floating through the air in the shaded part of the room. Only it wasn't floating, but looked more to be maneuvered, because it went from the mid-bottom portion of the room to the mid-top portion of the room, and by the time that it made its way into the exact rectangular area, that was in direct sunlight. Meanwhile, I was standing still, watching it, and I continued watching it move through the air haphazardly until it reached the sunlight, which seemed to calm it down, because by this point it literally floated back and forth, straight down to the ground. At that exact moment, I thought to myself, 1. Where the F did the feather come from? 2. The windows were open, but there was no wind, and they had no fans in the room, so what possibly could explain that? Years before, in 2015 or 2016, I'd had some weird stuff happen the night my grandfather died, before I had found out he had died. So I thought to myself, wow, this is weird. Grandpa Frankie, what are you trying to tell me? So I walk out to the room and stare down at the stairs to go to the kitchen. About halfway down the stairs, I hear 3 super fast but resonating knocks. I thought immediately how those sounded to come from the walls, but they also sounded to come from the front door. So I went to the front door. Nobody. Unfortunately, to this day, I haven't had any out of the ordinary things like that happen, but I'll never forget that experience. It was also during a very unhappy and lonely part in my life, in which I believe I contributed. In 1999, my husband drove to a barn one morning in his father's land and shot himself in the car. He was discovered the next day. That night, I went to bed with my distraught children with me. About 5 in the morning, my phone rang. It was a landline. It was my husband. "Hey," said very faintly, "I'm okay." No one will ever convince me that I imagined it. It actually happened. And I a long abandoned hospital that had weird rumors surrounding it. I was on the lookout at first. The others who went down to the basement were so visibly shook by what they saw they asked to switch. I still don't speak to me about what they saw, so I went in. It was perfectly right out of a ghost story documentary. For some reason, the lights were still working. They would flicker in a particular order that would correlate with sounds like doctors dropping tools on the floor. There was a wisp of energy or shadow that would float around and going from room to room. It was a group of the 6 of us. We kept following this entity for a while. I don't know why. It finally became not a thing of, okay, this is some shit we just can't get out of our heads. So I noped out of it too. Another odd thing, the camcorder. Yes, back in the day, we had the screen and it showed everything perfectly ATM. ATM, yes. When we watched it later, it statics out from the second we snuck under the garage entrance and has perfect recording the second we exit. The next weird thing is that an unmarked government car arrived and 2 guys in trench coats entered, and I helped sneak my friends out. That sounds like I made it up, but I swear it is true 100%. At 8 years old, I had Thanksgiving dinner with my dad's grandparents. After I asked my mom who they were there and felt normal. We were talking and eating together, but by the time I stood up to grab something from the kitchen and came back, they were gone, and so were their plates. That's where I understood it was weird, since I was in the kitchen and their plates and glasses didn't go into the sink. They never stepped into the kitchen. Then I wondered why the guy was shirtless. It's because his tattoos are what made my mom know who he was. It was an awesome experience, though. I was in NYC and my parents were in Delhi. One fine afternoon, I sat down for lunch alone, and for no reason, I started weeping. In a few minutes, I started sobbing. Later, I consoled myself, and like every day, I called my family in the evening, early morning, India time. That's when I realized my father had had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital and operated upon immediately a few hours earlier. He survived. The same thing happened a couple of years later when I got to the dreaded phone call to come back home. I knew I had lost him, and at the Delhi airport 20 hours later, I found out he was no more. Way before I was born, my parents traveled to Mexico and bought one of those bronzed tin masks of a woman with green glass pupils, long ring earrings, and a sort of tiara on her head. And for unknown reasons, my mother loved it. The mask wasn't particularly special. I think it was crap made for tourists, but an element everyone noticed right away was that the green eyes reflected amazingly well any light source, making it look like it glowed at night. By the time I came around, that mask hung at the top of our living room wall where my mom had a bunch of other paraphernalia from her trips. My parents used to travel a lot. I should also mention we lived in a place with high ceilings. Kind of unrelated, but I always was afraid of the dark, common in children, and I used to hear voices coming from the dark when I knew my family was somewhere else. It used to make me cry for hours. But my dad told me I had to toughen up, and my mother preferred to leaving crying naked in the hallway between the bathroom and my bedroom when caving to my pleas to fetch my clothes because there were so many people in my room. One night when I was 5, I got awoken by the sound of the voice of a young woman calling my name. It came from the living room. Because it was late, I had been sleeping. My eyes were well adapted to the darkness for me to see. I stepped off my bed, opened the door, and said something along the lines of, "Hello," or "Sis, is that you?" But they called me again, and there I saw it. It was the head of a young woman, green eyes glowing in the dark, and a tiara gleaming with the light seeping through the street. The floating head was actually flesh, not tin or anything else. Flesh. And there was no neck or anything. It wasn't a grotesque view. It was like an actual head just floating there. The head descended from the spot where I stood in the middle of the living room, and it began telling me I shouldn't be scared because it just wanted to talk to me, that I should open up to hear better. I was so confused. I reached out to touch the head and felt the coldness of the skin. As I felt it, the skin dried and flecked off, leaving a skull, but the green eyes stared at me, remained fixated. I screamed. I wanted to let go of that head, but it was like I was frozen. And then the light came on, and Mom was upset, asking me what I was doing, screaming in the middle of the living room. Then she saw the mask in my hands and asked me how I had gotten it from where it was. I told her everything that happened, and she ignored me and sent me to sleep, which I obviously couldn't. Interesting, though, the mask wasn't placed back on display, and it wasn't stored in the house after a while. Decades after that, I asked my mom what made her put it away, if she didn't believe me, and she said that after that she was so upset, while she fetched a ladder to put it back up, she heard a girl laughing, just from the table where she had put the mask, and though it had spooked her and she wasn't going to fall for any mental games. One night, my wife was at her friend's wedding reception at a local resort. She was going to drink and was supposed to call me to pick her up. After the reception was over, she decided that she was okay to drive, so she got into her truck and started heading home. She called me after she had just left, and it was quite obvious that she was heavily intoxicated. I was extremely upset by this. I begged her to stop so I could go and pick her up, but she was afraid if she stopped she would get a DUI. After fighting over this for 10 minutes, she eventually hung up the phone on me and wouldn't answer my calls. My daughter overheard our conversation, so she and I went and waited for her up in the room for her to come home, praying that she made it home safe. As my daughter and I sat in the living room waiting, we were both very relieved to hear her truck pull in the driveway, followed by the sound of the truck door closing and her keys jingling as she walked up to the doorstep. I have a keypad lock that beeps when you put the code in, and we heard that go off as well. As happy as we were that she had made it home, we were just shocked that she didn't walk through the front door. After a minute of waiting, I got up and looked outside to see what was taking so long. I was astonished when I realized that no one was there. About 2 minutes later, I was still outside, scratching my head as my wife finally rolled up in the driveway. While I was happy she made it home, I was still very confused. After the incident, I went to my daughter and asked her what she thought happened, and she and I both had no idea because we both heard the truck pull in, my wife's voice, her keys jingling, footsteps on the porch, and the door lock pin pad beeping. When I checked my Ring camera at the exact time when the incident occurred, something set off the camera, but I cannot see or hear anything. It just goes off, and then you see me walk outside 1 minute later, confused. Still to this day, don't know what we experienced, but I think it was maybe the universe telling us that someone we loved would make it home safe. Once I was getting ready to leave for a flight back to college. I lived one state over, and in the process of packing the car with my suitcase, the keys to the car went completely missing. I have ADHD, so this isn't totally abnormal for me to lose things. My entire family got involved and tore apart the car, the house, and searched the lawn to find the keys, but they were completely missing. My brother's girlfriend offered to drive me to the airport gracefully, so I go back to school after massively pissing off my mom, who had to get her new expensive key made for the car. We were both kind of poor, and my dad was going through cancer treatment, so it was really negative time in our lives. A few months later, my mom is home with my little brother, getting ready to take the dog for a walk. They were in the kitchen. She bends over to put the leash on the dog, and my brother is looking for something in the fridge when we hear a light crashing sound on the floor and turn to see the keys on the floor in the kitchen. No idea what happened, but they were literally materialized as if someone had just dropped them. I have a few, but probably the hardest one for skeptics to explain is the quill incident. This happened midday 2023. I was washing my dishes in the kitchen which I can see the living room window from the sink. On the ledge in the front of the window, I kept a few decorative items, one of which was a white feather pen with a decorative iron base that stands up. While I was washing my dishes, I watched the feather pen fly up about a foot above the ledge and then back down in a parabolic shape and land about a foot from the window. While the window was open, I assumed it could have been the wind, but upon picking it up, I realized what had happened. The iron base was still on the ledge, but the pen and the pen cap it sits on were both on the floor. The pen cap is threaded into the iron base, so in order to attach it, it needed to be twisted like a screw. The wind did not unscrew the pen from the base before tossing it off the ledge. If there was a wind, it would not have been a parabolic motion. A lot of weird stuff happened in that apartment, which supports it, but the incident alone is weird enough. So there you go. I hope you have enjoyed those stories. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and go check out another video. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll talk to you later.